as I was saying, I just want to quickly introduce the panelists. I think the panel here really represent the spirit of the partnership. We have two leaders of government from the agriculture sector in Liberia, Paraguay. We have two leaders of industry from soy and palm associations, and we have a leader from the finance sector. Please let me welcome and introduce Minister Wiles from Liberia, the Minister of Agriculture. She's recently appointed to the ministry, but I noted in her bio she's been working in the Ministry of Agriculture, can I say it, since 1974. So we have an unusual circumstance of a minister who really knows her topic. I see the same with the Vice Minister of Livestock for Paraguay. He too is actually a veterinarian by training. And again, I think it's outstanding to have in these countries leaders who really know their commodity and their productions. So we thank you both for coming and representing your countries. We also have two extremely important industry leaders. We have Mr. Joko from Indonesia, who represents the Palm Producers Association of Indonesia. As we heard in the framing of Indonesia, that represents a huge industry. So we thank you for being with us. And we also have Marcelo from Brazil, who represents the Soy Producers Association in Matapiba. Again, an incredibly important and powerful decision-making body that we rely on for sustainable soy in Brazil. So thank you, Marcelo. And finally, we have Courtney from Citi, who has been there 12 years. And again, I think is a real thought leader in the financial space and will help share her visions on how the finance sector can also stimulate and finance growth. So thank you all for being here. So now we'll start. I'm going to ask each of them a question that they'll respond to, and then we'll have a little panel discussion, and then I will see the questions that you all hand in, and we'll have hopefully time for around 3 questions. Okay? So let me start with you, Minister, and the same question will be for you, Vice Minister. You represent, as a Minister of Agriculture, your government in Liberia, responsibility and leadership to grow palm oil in Liberia. So can you please share with us a little bit about your government's vision and plan to grow and expand Liberian palm oil sector, perhaps some targets that you are aiming for, and explain a little how you will try to achieve this growth and these targets, whilst at the same time taking into account forest conservation. Please.
Good morning. Palm oil in Liberia is developing quickly, having started real concentration in 2009. The government of Liberia, we have allocated up to 600,000 hectares as areas of interest. But now, having been involved in oil palm production since 2009, seriously involved, we've had problems, and we're really looking at the sector for sustainability and life changes to make sure that with this, it's growing quickly. We're putting processes in place that will speak to sustainability in the oil palm production sector. However, okay, we said we have 600,000, we put aside 600,000 hectares as area of interest. But giving our commitment to, like I said, to sustainability, oil palm development, we need to look at this differently. And from the experiences, the problems we've been having, we are looking at it differently as a government. We are focused. We found out with the problems that we're having that we need to focus in a different area. As such, we're focusing more on community involvement at the initial stages of establishment of concessions. We've even put it as part of our requirement in all the concession agreements. We are proceeding through a participatory process. We want the communities in which these concessions or palm plantations are established. The government is speaking with the communities to live in these areas, to have good livelihood and allow development of the country through the production of oil palm, because we all know the importance of oil palm. Our oil palm, we have, in the Ministry of Agriculture, we have a technical oil palm working group that meets regularly. I think like once or twice a month. They meet and we come up with ideas and how we're going to proceed in the sector. We've had a lot of community problems where the concessions are established. In fact, last week we had to give the president a broad investigation thing about this week on what to do and what not to do. So anyway, we are looking at a landscape approach that pairs agriculture development with local livelihoods. Like I said before, is mainly we have a project now that these people have to live around these concession areas in the communities. So we're developing programs that also will give them an option at different lifestyle changes, because most of them were living on the forest before. They live before these places were deforested to establish these concession areas. Now, we're helping them to develop a different way of life, not depending so much on use of the forest. They live in the communities. The forest is more like a conservation approach where they have good lives and the sector is developing for financial gains. We have, within the Ministry of Agriculture, we have a coordination committee which we've re-established to look at sustainability. And they meet every month, and we've given a different approach even to that committee, that after their meeting, we act on whatever they've come up with, be it problems or successes. We review that after our meeting. We're paying actual attention now to sustainability in the sector. The country has, of course, we are committed to the principles of sustainability by participation in the Marrakesh Declaration. Mitigate impact on the environment and the well-being of our people. So now, after how many years? About 8 or 9 years of serious oil palm production in Liberia, we've learned a lot, and we're putting a lot of changes into place by the government being involved, in partnership with the private sector. So anyway, I thank you. I will answer any questions you have.
Thank you very much, Minister. What we will do is we'll take questions at the end for the panel, okay? Thank you very much for sharing that. We now have Marcos Medina, the Vice Minister of Livestock, Ministry of Agriculture in Paraguay, who I know and I was fortunate to meet recently when I was there. Within the Good Growth Partnership, Paraguay is one of the partner countries with a focus on sustainable beef in the Chaco region, which has vast remaining forests. And I know from our discussions in Paraguay, the government have ambitious plans for beef growth and export, which are important for the country. So please, Vice Minister, if you could share a little bit about your ministry's plans for growth of the Chaco and the role of beef and how you plan to balance that with protecting the forests in the Chaco. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our UPM Tetauma Paraguay Maitei. Paraguay is a bilingual country, actually the only one who's officially bilingual in Latin America. So I'm just saying in our native language, Guarani, thank you very much. I bring you the greeting of the Paraguayan people. It's a great honor and great pleasure to be here present with you. I think this is an important way to start working together, thinking that we by ourselves can get the results we can get together in benefit of our countries and finally in benefit of the planet. Let me tell you a little bit about Paraguay. Paraguay is a landlocked country, just in the center of South America, with the size of California approximately, with only 7 million people. We are among the less developed countries in Latin America due to several historical and social situations in the past. But the thing is, during the last 20 years, we have experienced a very important development socially and economically. And during these last 20 years, we have positioned ourselves as key commodity producers in the world. We are not only number 6 world producers of beef, exporters in beef in the world, but we are also number 4 of exporter of soybean, and we also produce we are in number 7 in corn production, rice, wheat, etc. The country has taken the opportunity of world food demand as an opportunity for social and economic development in the country. And we as a country, we have a clear vision that food production is a strategic tool to reach our social and economic development. We have a national development strategic plan by which in year 2030 we want to strengthen and position Paraguay as a key producer of food for the world, and through food production reach our 3 main objectives as a country. The first one is poverty reduction. The second one is generating an economic and inclusive economy in the country, and the third one is positioning Paraguay in the world. Going to the very first objective, poverty reduction, we have this clear vision that we cannot reduce poverty without creating wealth. And we in Latin America, we have several cases in which we can prove that those models that promote social development, weakening economic development, have been proven a failure. They are now a real failure. And we understand where we have to create a model in which the economy has to strengthen the social, and we have to keep the balance with the environment. Thus, and I think our first great challenge is how to reach that balance in the 3 dimensions of sustainable development: economic, social, and environmental. Now, let me go a little bit about our livestock. And when we talk about livestock, I must mention that Paraguay is among the countries that have experienced during the last 15 years a tremendous growth. 15 years ago, we were a marginal exporter of beef to the world, with exports below $50 million per year. By year 2016, we surpassed $1.7 billion. We increased our export by 21 times. No country in the world has experienced such a growth in beef production and exports. Right now, we are number 6 world exporter, and we are pointing out to become the number 5th. And in order to do so, we'll keep advancing on this process of transforming our natural resources into the possibilities that will help us reach that social and economic development. I think it's also important to say that during this process in which we increase our export by 21 times, we also decrease poverty from 50% to less than 20% in the population. So, which means that livestock in particular, and we will say also soybean as a chain value, they are the main driver of social changes in our country. And then we come to this point where we understand that we have to start working in a new development model. And in that scenario, we value very much the help we are getting from the United Nations, from GAPKI in the person of Joko. Thank you very much for that help, because we really understand that the real challenge is to get into that social and economic development in a very in a way where we can really ensure that the new generation will have a better country, not only in terms of economic and social, but also in terms of the environmental heritage. So we basically want to take the opportunity to ensure, as a government, we are fully committed with the vision of start a new way of working together, or start a new vision of economic and social development. And we are also fully committed that we have to all together work in a new way to have a better planet and a better world for the new generations. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Vice Minister, and thank you very much for both of you for sharing your government's visions and setting the scene. We will now move to our industry representatives. So those who are actually running businesses based upon these commodities and represent their fellow businessmen also producing these commodities. Maybe we'll start with you, Marcelo. And it's a similar question for you. As a producer, as a representative of soy producers, your businesses are based upon production and growth of soy. So if you can share your vision for your associations and your member producers' plans to maintain viable businesses and grow businesses based on soy, and how you plan to do that, yet at the same time taking into account forest conservation.
Well,
thank you.
Thank you for this opportunity. Just one small correction. I do not represent only soybean producers, but all sorts of agricultural producers in Brazil. We see as the best good growth strategies for agriculture in Brazil, mainly 3 main initiatives in these agricultural frontier areas. First one, the main focus of our work will be to promote new models of climate-smart, low-carbon agriculture. We have to send the best technical teams to the field to learn with the best producers, to the best appropriate models, and diffuse them to all growers in the regions. And we have a very good advantage on that, because we have already analysis done by the best consultants showing that the most sustainable models are also the ones that give the best returns to producers. So this will be a good model to promote. And one major challenge that we are going to have also is to have new models of financing, because these new models demand lots of long-term investments, so we need to encourage long-term financing in this region with appropriate models. We already have a ABC program, a low-carbon program in Brazil, but this is not really taking off on scale yet, and we have to work with the government to promote larger scale for that. One other focus of our work in this region will be to support all agricultural producers in this region to achieve full adequacy to our forest code. Brazil has the most complete environmental legislation amongst all large food producers in the world, demanding that every producer saves an important part of his farm as a legal reserve to protect all riparian areas. And this is being implemented. We have 20 years to implement that. This is advancing well. All the mapping to have the proper land use and definition of the best landscapes to be preserved is already being done. What we need to encourage more of that is to have models like we are discussing here to add proper valuation of responsibly sustainable production in the world market to promote, to encourage farmers to move more rapidly in that direction. One other important strategy that we see for this, especially for this region of Mato Piba, that has not a very large proportion of the region that's viable for good agriculture. Large area of this region is not proper for agriculture. Many marginal areas that have been degraded over the last centuries, and there must be a good opportunity for restoration of these areas to encourage these traditional communities who occupy these areas with very low incomes to go towards restoration and create an environmental services industry that will encourage that and promote that and finance that. And that can also be linked to adequation to the forest code, because after restoration, they can also sell compensation to those that have deficits of legal reserves. And for that, we must develop a new business in the region, develop an environmental services business, bringing better incomes to all these communities. As a final, remember, I say that one of the most important focus, and we are also working with other players, we have created a coalition for Mato Piba, gathering all the best producers, the best traders, the best consultants, academy, to develop new models, and also working in collaboration with government trade promotion agencies to achieve adequate valuation and good market access to the best products, to products that have been responsibly and sustainably produced. So these will be the focus of our work. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcelo. And I should also just clarify that the partnership is focused in Brazil and specifically in the Mato Piba region, which is covering the Cerrado savanna. I should have said that to begin with, so thank you. Now we move to our other industry leader, Pak Joko. I'd like to invite you to share your visions of the palm oil producers of Indonesia on how you plan to grow your palm oil industry, yet at the same time take into account forest conservation. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. As my boss, Ibu Musdalifah Mahmud, speech, that Indonesian palm oil industry again is have a very significant role to Indonesian development, not only for the economic, due to the high export earning, and then economic growth, but also in terms of the social, because palm oil industry is about 5 million people depend on this industry, and including farmer and smallholders. But also palm oil industry in Indonesia concern in terms of the environment friendly practices. As Bu Musdalifah mentioned, that this we are now in the ongoing to strengthen our ISPO. So with this, Indonesian industry will continue to develop palm oil, because again, this industry should be grow in the future. What is the looking at this current production? Indonesian palm oil now is have around 35 million production a year, which is now is the biggest production. We don't have a target basically, but we projected this production will increase, and we have projected this by 2020 the production will increase by 42 million ton maybe. On the other hand, this Indonesian position as a export in the market leader in the export market is important also for us. So how to achieve this as Andrew asked, we will focus on this increasing production instead of the expansion. In the last 20 years, Indonesia is very fast in expansion, but in the last 5 years, we look at the different approach, because looking our productivity is still there is room for improvement to increase. In particular, the productivity of the smallholders. Don't forget, that is talking about Indonesian palm oil is 40% is owned by the smallholders. So we can have together company and smallholders to increase production. So that's why as a company association, we focus on how to increase productivity through research and development and replanting of the old trees. But for the smallholders, we have to do partnership with them. They need also to increase their productivity, but they can do alone. They need help. So industry, association, company need to do partnership with the smallholder to increase their productivity. How? Also, we have to replant their old plantation with a good planting material, and also we have to help them to better cultivation. So with this, we hope that this production of the smallholder plantation can be increased in the coming years. Again, partnership with the smallholder is key, and together with the government, we will take this opportunity to increase Indonesian position in terms of production, and also enabling smallholders for better cultivation in their plantation. How to, this issue is now, as just mentioned before, this palm oil is the main cause of deforestation. How now industry to take care about the deforestation, how to minimize the deforestation. Yes, sometimes deforestation is, it's depend on how to look at it. Because I would like to tell you that for sure that this palm oil expansion in Indonesia do not use the forest area legally, because you have to respect Indonesian law of forestry. So all the palm oil industry expand in the land outside of the forest area. But on the other hand, the concern of the global community is about the forest cover. So that's why in the recent years we support the government initiative in a moratorium on the new license in primary forest and also peat, regardless it is forest area or not. So again, we respect this initiative of the government to halt the new expansion on the forest, on the primary forest in particular. On top of that, we as an industry association also work together with the government to, what the quality is, how to develop a strong and clear spatial planning, including how to support government to finalizing the one map policy. So with this, with the clear spatial planning, with the strong one map policy, then it's easy for the industry to develop further. And on top of this, I want to also mention some matters that is the issue regarding with this deforestation need to be solved among parties, not only government. Even government is central government, local government is also some ministry, but also we need the dialogue also with the smallholders and other stakeholders like civil society. So again, the most important and strategies for Indonesia to increase the production of this palm oil is to intensification program with the best yielding of the plantation and do partnership with the smallholder with the support of the government and other parties, including the financial institution to support this program. Again, this is our recent focus in Indonesia to strengthen our commitment all party in terms of how to produce more sustainable palm oil in Indonesia. Again, our vision is we have to be still the biggest and the most sustainable palm oil industry. Thank you.
And I think we particularly welcome the Indonesia industry's position and vision to achieve your growth targets through improved productivity and reduced expansion. That's really what we're all here to work with you on, so thank you. Our final speaker from the panel, Courtney, I welcome you to share with us your vision on how the finance sector can also play a role in financing and funding and supporting growth of the commodities, yet at the same time balancing the conservation of forests. So over to you, Courtney. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to express my excitement about the partnership, and really want to thank the GEF and UNDP for having all of these these expertise in the room. It is a little bit intimidating. So I lead Citi's environmental and social risk team within Citi. And Citi is in an interesting position. I have the pleasure of being in a global position. We operate in 160 countries. And I'm actually very keen to start a dialogue because Citi has experience in the palm oil sector in both Liberia and Indonesia. Well, one of the things that I've learned in my time is that sustainable landscapes, sustainable production landscapes, it really depends on the commodity and the country. And all of the actors. It really takes a lot of multi-stakeholder participation. We at Citi, I think, we see two roles for a bank, for large international banks. One is adhering to standards, particularly around sustainability, and we take a leadership role in groups, organizations like the Round Table on Sustainable Palm Oil. The other is really financial innovation. So how can we innovate so that we develop financial products that incentivize sustainability? It's challenging because we sit at the top of the supply chain, and while our clients are typically multinational corporates, often in the consumer goods space, we do finance producers, large producers, but it's really the smallholders, I think, that is the challenge of ensuring that long-term capital is available to small farmers. And one of the ways that we've really explored this is through working with local financial institutions. So most banks at the size of Citi, multinational banks, we have a significant financial intermediary portfolio. And so we finance a number of the Indonesian banks, for example, Brazilian banks. One of my remit, the team's remit at Citi, is global capacity building. And we spend quite a bit of time in different countries building the capacity of local financial institutions. So a lot of people say, why do you spend so much of your time doing that? Why does your management allow you to do it? And there's really two reasons. One is that many times they're clients, and increasingly they're competitors. So in Brazil, for example, we really can't adhere to a standard, nor would it be effective if the Brazilian banks weren't on board, if they also did not adhere to the standard. I think the same is true in Indonesia. We really need the palm oil, the local Indonesian banks to adhere to the same standards across. So, and we're lucky, we're fortunate that we have such leadership in some of the banking regulators in both Brazil and Indonesia. The OJK in Indonesia and the Brazilian Central Bank have taken great leadership roles. But I'll pass it back over to you, Andrew. And I'm keen. I have lots of questions for the panelists.
And business opportunities.
And business opportunities.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Courtney. And I think you got me so excited about the conversation. Thank you all. And I think you begin to see how all of these different sectors start interweaving, and how exactly the reason why we have this, let's say, integrated approach. We need the banking to work with the industry and the government. So firstly, thank you all to the panelists. That was a fantastic, I think, summary and overview of the visions from your different perspectives. We have time for just a couple of questions, and there's a couple of stimulating ones that I'm eager to ask. So the first one is to the government. So maybe we'll see who can answer this, or if you have time for both. From a government perspective, what do you see as the role of the private sector in stimulating the growth of commodities in your country, yet at the same time conserving forests? So from the government perspective, what is it you'd like to see from your producers and the buyers in helping you fulfill your growth visions? I don't know, Minister, Vice Minister, who would like to answer that?
Ladies first.
There you go. Yeah.
Okay, like my fellow panelists said about the Agro scheme for growing the sector. We encouraging that in Liberia. We did it with the rubber. I was speaking, were you the one I was speaking with? We did it with the rubber sector. The outgrowers, they actually are the ones that feed the primary exporter. Like in our case, it's Firestone. And so, yeah, Firestone Rubber Company. And we encouraged them to get the smallholders, involved and set all kinds of incentives to get them growing. It's the same thing that we're starting with the oil palm. I was speaking to one of the officials of one of the concessions working in Liberia, and we're still struggling with it, getting the small farmer involved, but that's the future. It will create wealth, but it will also help us to grow faster, because that's what they want. Now it's surprising in Liberia, everybody wants to grow oil palm. We got all these nurseries coming up with high quality seedlings and all that. The sector is growing, there's potential. There's even, we even working now with the sector, the oil palm. We're doing, like, for instance, the byproducts of oil palm we're using to develop our soils, our, the chaff, putting it back in the land to help the farmers, and then less dependency on chemical fertilizers. Yeah. We started it with the one in Grand Cru, GVL. Yeah, and so it's spreading. So when the small holders are involved, it will make a big difference. Yeah.
I have been in the private sector before being in the public sector, so I know very well how private sector perceive this type of situations, and at least in our scenarios, many times these efforts are seen as threats, not as opportunities. So I would like to see, now I'm working in the public sector and starting to have a different vision. I would like to see a private sector which first understand that the economic dimension is important in sustainable development, but it's not all. And the second, the importance of having a long-term vision. So I would like to see a private sector committed with not only the economic, but also with the social and environmental dimension of sustainable development, as well as to have a long-term vision in order to encourage and in order to get this common vision of a new way of sustainable development, in order to not only get the profit now, but also to get profit for the future, and also to understand that the real key for this success is not in the me, but it's in the together. Thank you.
So we're not running out of time, we're over time, but I will have one more. I'm a very bad facilitator. I would like to have one final question. I'll put to you, Marcelo. I think we can't just ask the government what they want from private sector. So as representing not just soy, but agriculture business in Brazil, what is it that you, as private sector, would like to see from government of Brazil, but what is it that you need from government to help your business and you see other businesses promoting sustainability?
Well, what we need, really, the main priority for us in collaboration with government is to work on the world market to properly show the models of production in Brazil, to update the image of Brazilian production, which is very based on older models of unsustainable agriculture. Brazilian agriculture is seen as deforestation and low labor standards, and that's just the opposite of the current reality. For the last decades, new models of production have evolved, and they tend to be, well, we have a strong, one of the strongest labor legislations applying all urban legislation to the fields. And we don't have any type of illegal immigrants working on agriculture. We have very responsible labor regulations and the best environmental standards. So we must show this to the world market. And so we're starting a new trade promotion program with the government. And the good thing about that is that the most sustainable production models that have evolved for the last decades for tropical agriculture, they, if you're more environmentally responsible, if you have better models of environmental equilibrium, you tend to have higher yields and lower costs as well. So that's the best model for production in tropical environments. And this must be encouraged, and new models have to be spread. One other issue with government, for Brazil particularly, is that Brazil has too much regulation in all these sectors, and this should be worked to be more rational, let's say. Not lower regulation, but to make it simpler to conform with. These are the priorities.
Excellent. Well, a good way to close out the panel. I would like to ask everyone to thank the panel. I thought it was excellent, and I also think it really shows the value and power of bringing these different countries and different sectors together, and we will do our best to help share lessons between the countries and between the different sectors to start having these more constructive dialogues. So thank you very much. Yeah, that's good. Thanks.